Hey guys, this is Curtis from Just Another Night, and today we're going to be talking about game franchises that are more dead than the dodos. So without further ado, let's get into it. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and let us know down below in the comments what games you think should come back, or what game series you're upset haven't died yet. And remember to stick around to the end of the video where you'll find out my personal game series that I regret ever letting die. Games have been around since the dawn of time, with people trying to find different ways to entertain themselves. In the 1950s, due to computing and technology becoming greater than it normally was, it caused a surge for video games and interactive electronics to become more of the norm. In the 1970s, arcade games surged to popularity. This was games such as like Pong, which is essentially just an arcade game of table tennis, which was quite interesting. And then, since then, there's been nothing but leaps and bounds in the technology and leaps and bounds in how video games have been designed. But with that being said, there's a lot of the time where video games will start, they'll create a series or a franchise, and then they'll just eventually dim down and die out. In this video, we'll be going over some of my personal favourite video games that have just died and they're never coming back. The issue of death of a franchise is such a common thing in the video game industry. Sometimes it can be down to people reviewing games really badly and it causing like studios to go under, or it could be due to just poor public reception. There are also some cases where games get really poor public reception, but then they kind of develop a cult following. So a good example of this is the game that was released on the Xbox 360 called Too Human. This game was so badly reviewed and like all the critics hated it, a lot of people hated it, but it had such a large cult following that it couldn't go anywhere because it wasn't backed up enough and it wasn't supported enough, but it still has like a very loyal fan base to this day. So for me personally, whenever I think about dead franchises, one of the first game series that will come to my mind is Fable. Although Fable 1 and 2 were both critically renowned, Fable 3 kind of fell a little bit in the water. In 2012, they released another mainline game, supposedly, called Fable The Journey, which was a Kinect-based game. However, because of Fable 3's really bad reviews, the sales didn't really pick up for The Journey. They had released a fourth mainline game for the series that was going to be released on the Xbox One by Lionhead Studios, but sadly because they went under, it was never released and it was never put into fruition. But in 2018, the project was picked up by Playground Games, although we haven't really heard anything about it since, so we are all unaware of what's actually going on. So it could come back, but after 8 years of a mainline game, the chances are quite slim. Now, whenever we think about mainline shooter games, we're normally thinking Call of Duty or Battlefield, but do you remember Medal of Honor? This was a game series that started in 1999, and although they are planning to send out a new game this year, in 2020, the series has been dead for 8 years, so we're not entirely sure what's really going on with that. Starting off on the PlayStation 1, the Medal of Honor franchise boomed. This moved over to PS3 and Xbox 360, but kind of fell short when it came to the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. So this game was incredible for the stories that it did, but sadly as soon as it came to multiplayer, it just kind of died out. People got tired of the whole World War fighters, and because of this, it just didn't have as much pull when it came to the audience. The issue with the multiplayer was just that, sadly, Call of Duty did it better, same as Battlefield. The last mainline game that they released was Medal of Honor Warfare, or Warfighter. It was one of the two. And this was in 2012. And because of the studio just not making enough money off it, they refused to do anything more. There is a game set to release in this year, 2020, which is a Medal of Honor game, but it's more different than the rest. So they're planning on doing a VR game, which should be quite good, and to be honest, it could be the breath of fresh air that this franchise needs in order to get itself back up and get it to be one of the major players again like it used to be. So let's just kind of hope for the best on that one. Remember before, when EA used to produce an awful amount of sports games, there were those incredible ones like SS Tricky, which was just a snowboarding game. Well, during this, there was also the incredible game of Skate. Skate was a series that was based around skateboarding, which is quite obvious from the name. There were 3 games in total of the series, and the last one being released in 2010 on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. This is a game that I still play today. In fact, me and Idris were playing it just a couple of weeks ago, which is, it's quite fun. The graphics don't hold up so good, but it is genuinely just an amazing game. This game series was made in order to rival the Tony Hawk series, which, as we can all see, is clearly dead in the water. I don't remember a mainstream release of that game for the past 7 or 8 years. I think the last one was the one with the actual skateboard, Tony Hawk Ride, which was not a great game at all. So there have been yearly rumours about whether this game is going to get another link in the franchise, but every single year it kind of comes up short and no one really knows what's going on with it. So at the moment the franchise is dead, but they might still bring some life into it yet. They have brought the servers back online, which is great. Due to the backwards compatibility on the Xbox One, you can still play the game and you can still play with your friends because it's now online. But I'm not too sure about getting another reboot. So if you're a fan of the Assassin's Creed series, no doubt you've probably heard of or played at least one of the Prince of Persia series. This is another franchise that I believe is it's died without good reason. So this as a game franchise is honestly just incredible. So the game franchise started in 1989, and a lot of the earlier games, although I don't think they have much replayability now, back in their time they were so great. Like, the graphics kind of held up for what they were, the story was great. But as a whole, the studio have kind of tried to involve as much as they can. They've changed up every single game to try and include more people and build up a crowd and build up a loyal fan base. Although this series started a lot before my time, I still remember playing it as a child, and I grew up on the games on the PlayStation 2. However, I do remember playing one of the games on the Xbox 360. It was the self-titled Prince of Persia game, and it was completely different, so it had a different art style, and I could never really get into it. For me, the pinnacle of this franchise was Prince of Persia: Sands of Time and The Warrior Within. In 2010 was the last mainstream release of the Prince of Persia games, and it was called The Forgotten Sands. So this game was a decent game, but to put in perspective of how old it is now, it came out on the Wii, so it was never really going to be like a massive mainstream game, and I think because of that and because of how badly it was perceived, they just kind of crashed it, because they were also working on the Assassin's Creed series at the same time, so all the ideas that were going to go into the next Prince of Persia kind of went into Assassin's Creed because at the time it was doing an awful lot better. Now, the last franchise on my list is the one that I hold dearest to me, and that is the Jak and Daxter series. So this was very, very important for me growing up. I remember the PlayStation 2, and I played all 3 of the mainline games almost religiously, and when it got remastered and put onto the PlayStation 3 the day of release, I went out and bought the box copy because it was just something that I cared about so much, and I've played through all of those games way too many times. This series was filled with a riveting story. So you play as Jak, the protagonist, and in the first game he's silent, and then in the second game he speaks for the first time, and it's such an interesting story, and there's so much lore surrounding this world that it's honestly incredible, and it's probably, to this day, one of the best franchises that I've ever played. Although the game had a lot of different spin-offs, there weren't any that really were great. So there was one called Jak X, which was basically a racing game with a Jak and Daxter skin. It followed a very simple story, but it just wasn't that good. The only one that I would really say is worth playing is probably Daxter. So this is a game that was released on the PSP, and you played as Daxter, who is the protagonist's sidekick. And it's based in the 2 years between Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy, the first game, and Jak 2. And it's such a fun game, although if you replay it now, the graphics definitely do not hold up, but the story is worth it. The final game in this series was called Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier. Or Jak: The Lost Frontier. It was one of the two. It was The Lost Frontier. So this game was made on the PS Vita, I believe, or the PSP, and it was incredibly bad. The camera angles were awful. Jak just didn't look like Jak. It didn't follow a good enough story to what it actually was meant to be. and you can tell that it wasn't produced by Naughty Dog and they had gave it to someone else. And this is what I believe personally killed off the franchise. Let's hope that after the release of Last of Us 2, Naughty Dog will finally get back and put this back on the table for one of the games that they plan to do. But for now, they are releasing it on pretty much every generation of console anyway, so you can always replay the original trilogy, and to me, it is definitely worth buying or picking up if you haven't already played it. Or even if you have played it, it's just an incredible game. So that's the end of my list for today, so let us know in the comments down below what you think your favourite Dead franchise is, or if there's a franchise you believe that's been going on way too long. For me personally, it's FIFA. I think it's had its day, it should definitely be finished by now. Hope you guys are all keeping well, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and let us know what you've been getting up to. Remember to follow us on all of our social media. You'll find it in the description below via our link tree. And yeah, I hope you guys are doing okay. Good game.